Good evening, everyone. My name is Andy Rathman Noonan. I am the Executive Director of the National Science and Technology Medals Foundation. We're so excited to have you all here for STEM Spotlights, Careers in Engineering. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Jerrod Henderson and Ms. Mayra Montrose for being here to share their experiences and advice with all of you tonight. I'd also like to thank Ms. Brianna Young, who will be leading our discussion. She's a senior at UMass studying biomedical engineering. And finally, a special thanks to the National Science Foundation for their generous support that allows us to share evenings like this with you all. It is our mission to build diverse and inclusive STEM communities that are equitable and truly representative of our society. So where do we start? Well, it's in classrooms and webinars just like this one, highlighting voices that are often left out of the conversation and creating spaces where students like yourselves can both learn from and relate to experts who share our goals for the future of STEM. What we hope to show through this conversation and all of our programming is that there isn't one way to build a STEM career, and there certainly isn't just one perfect path to success. But there are, at every turn, incredible role models and mentors that you can look to for advice and inspiration. We hope that tonight's conversation serves as just one such reflection point for you along your way. We invite you to join in tonight's conversation, and in doing so, help us create an inclusive and safe space for all. When using the chat or asking questions, please take a moment to reflect on how your language may be perceived by others here. Thank you for your contributions and for helping us create a respectful environment where everyone feels welcome to listen, share, and enjoy. One final note before we get started. If you have technical issues, please text Laura Charity and she'll help you troubleshoot. She's about to drop her phone number in the chat right now, and her contact information is also listed in the event email that you all received earlier today. Now, I'll turn it over to our featured experts and moderator to kick off the discussion.
Welcome to the National Science and Technologies Medal Foundation STEM Spotlight Series, where we're meeting the top minds in STEM to learn more about their paths to success. I'm Brianna Young, a senior at UMass Amherst studying biomedical engineering. Joining us today is Ms. Mayra Montrose and Dr. Jerrod Henderson. Yeah. Ms. Montrose is an Assistant Deputy Associate Administrator for Programs in Science Mission Directorate of NASA. Ms. Montrose has worked at the National Science Foundation and the White House National Science and Technology Council. Dr. Henderson is an Instructional Assistant Professor in the Chemical Engineering Department at the University of Houston and the Director of Program for Mastery in Engineering Studies, also known as PROMES, a program aimed at increasing engineering students' achievement, engagement, and graduation rates. To our live audience today, the Zoom Q&A feature will be open as soon as we start this conversation. So go ahead and submit questions whenever you have them. And in the second half of our event, we'll try to answer those questions and hear from any of you that want to talk directly with us over the video. Thanks for joining us, Ms. Montrose and Dr. Henderson.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Good to be here. I'm really excited.
Ms. Montrose, from my research, I am very impressed by all the positions you've held. What do you think are the primary factors that have contributed to your success?
So I have to tell everybody that I'm a very stubborn person. And I think that that is very useful when it comes to careers. In addition to that, I believe that whenever you see an opportunity, you should take it. So yes, so I started my career as an engineer at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where I worked with experiments that flew in the space shuttle. And at the time, my husband needed to move to Washington, so I had to leave that job, and I came to DC to work with biology experiments, of which I knew nothing about. But that's the job I had to get. It was the only one available. So I learned everything about how do you fly biology in space, which is insane. It is so hard to keep things alive in space. So I became a great proponent, and I ended up loving flying biology experiments in space and learning about the science regarding that. Then my boss was like, hey, why don't you go to Congress, do a rotation in Congress? Yes. So now I added policy to my portfolio. And in coming back from Congress, I had the opportunity to work in the Office of the Chief Scientist at NASA, working policy for NASA and also communications with other agencies and within NASA, that policy. Then I got tired of that and I'm like, I think I want to go back to engineering. So I applied for a job and got a job in exploration for NASA, which was a completely new area at the time. And after about a year there, they asked me to lead the education part of exploration, which I knew nothing about. So I'm like, yes, why not? So I had wonderful mentors that really helped me. And that's another lesson for all of you, is to always find your mentors. Find people that you can ask questions, that you can bounce ideas off, to make sure that you look at all your options in a very methodical way. So from that, I decided to get a different job and I moved on to applied sciences for earth science missions. Completely different. I knew nothing about it, but yet I seized the opportunity to learn about these projects. Then I got that call from the National Science Foundation, where I ended up for 9 years working with the National Science and Technology Medals Foundation and the White House for the presidential awards for the National Medal of Science. So that was completely different. It used a very different skill set. But one thing you learn in engineering is problem solving, right? That's what we are trained to do. So those skills apply to anything you do. So after 9 years at NSF, I had this opportunity to come back to NASA. I started as a program executive, again, not really remembering how to do engineering since I had not done it for 9 years, but I was able to not just pick that up, but I was able to get my promotion to this for the Deputy Associate Administrator for Programs. So now I'm responsible for, at last count, 112 space developments. That is all the missions that are flying in space, all those rovers that you see in other planets, all the Earth observing satellites, missions that look at the sun, and all the giant observatories, the telescopes like Hubble. I have that in my portfolio, and not even counting any small instrument that flies on an airplane or a small rocket or a balloon. So my responsibilities have also increased as I moved through my career, but I was not afraid to completely change and try something that was not engineering and very new to me, even in not really knowing, starting the job, what was expected of me. So I would say that the skills to, the things to remember is get good mentors, take the opportunity when it's in front of you, seize the moment, learn, and be bold and be stubborn, don't let anyone tell you no. So that's what I've learned and how I went through all of these different things in my career.
Thank you. I really liked your answer. Dr. Henderson, I read an article about the after-school programs that you're affiliated with. In one section, it discusses the parents' involvement in the programs. Can you explain the benefits you have seen from students by having the involvement of their parent versus without having that involvement?
Oh, awesome. Sure. And thank you for doing your research and reading about this program. It's part of my life's work. It's the program you're referring to is called the St. Elmo Brady STEM Academy. And it was named after St. Elmo Brady, who was the first African-American male to earn his PhD in chemistry. And he's a graduate of the University of Illinois, where I also did my graduate studies. And so they had a huge poster of him, and he inspired the name of this program. And there are other pieces as to why we decided to name the program after him. I'm a co-founder. There's an additional founder of the program. But this program was birthed out of a need to give back to the community. And so I grew up in North Carolina, and we were always taught from grandparents, aunts, uncles, my mom, dad, reach back, always help somebody else, bring them along. So I'm getting to answer this question, but as I thought about what we want to share tonight, it's really related to what nuggets can you all, mostly undergrads, take away. And so that's one. don't forget about those that are coming behind you. So from literature and from research, I discovered, and from practice, that students as early as 4th grade decide that they're not good at science, they're not good at math. And so this program was developed as a way to, especially underrepresented students, to expose them to science and math early outside of the normal school setting. So as an after school and Saturday program. And so a big component of this program is parent involvement, especially fathers. And so what we found, especially with dads and boys, we are able to bond about sports and other things. But we decided to create this program to get families, especially dads, to bond about STEM. And so having parents engaged, to get at answering your question, we've seen tremendous results and tremendous responses. One of the things we see is the joy from the students being able to brag to say that their family's here or their parents are here. And the students have the opportunity to teach STEM to some adult. So the problem solving, as as Mayra said, that we teach them in the after school component, when their families show up on Saturday, now they're demonstrating their ability to explain these STEM concepts at their level to these adults. So this program is all about creating community, and a community of bonding about STEM, something that we don't always do. Most people, when I go present at conferences, sometimes I start out with the question, when did you fall in love with STEM? I got this from a movie, Brown Sugar, where they said, when did you fall in love with hip hop? And often when I ask people that, they'll say, you'll hear throughout the audience, when did you fall in love with STEM? Oh no, all of these moans and groans. So we really wanted to expose these students to starting to love and enjoy STEM early. But tremendous impact when those families are there. And what we've done, because we understand that sometimes in our communities, the parents aren't available, they have to work. We provide STEM mentors that look like them. So I hire undergraduate engineering students. They come work for the program after school as well as on Saturdays. We call them mentors. But last little point towards that, we've seen it in literature and we've seen it in practice. Also, my parent does not have to be a quote unquote STEM person to push me to want to become a STEM person, right? The fact that they show interest in me learning about this is enough to get the students to continue to pursue STEM. From my own story, when I was growing up, my dad was a truck driver, but he encouraged me, oh, you like chemistry? I might not understand it all, but you're going to be in this summer camp. You're going to do this. You're going to participate in these activities to expose you to it. So.
Thank you for that. I really like that.
Awesome. Thanks.
I love your program.
Oh, thank you.
That's awesome.
I appreciate that.
So I have a question, and it's directed toward either one of you. What are some ways you can include local organizations and students to help with your mission of increasing children of color to be exposed to STEM at a young age?
I can tell you. So I do belong to professional societies, which I think are important in our careers as engineers, starting in college and moving on through professional circles. They're really good places of network. So as such, I am on the board of the AIAA, American Institute of Astronautics and Aeronautics. I'm on the board for our local region. And we have very specific mentoring activities as well as summer camps that we run together with NASA at Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. So we go to all the regional and local science fairs. We send AIAA members to all of these science fairs, and we pick which projects were related in any way to astronautics and aeronautics, and we invite those kids to our event. They get to spend a week at Goddard, but then they have lifelong mentors from all the people they meet there, and we do keep up. So, for example, I also take interns in the summer, And I have a long list of my interns that I still keep in touch with from all walks of life. And they don't have to be engineers to be my interns. In fact, sometimes I prefer them to be in liberal arts because we need liberal arts students to understand STEM to help us communicate. So I want a really good writer, for example, that can help me continue to promote my programs. So that is how I try to stay in touch with the community. Also, there's a lot of other opportunities, like with First Robotics, that anyone can go and help any school there throughout the United States with both the Lego competition and the actual the big one, the first. That's a great way to reach to kids. And our first robotics team in my local high school was mostly minority students. I was very proud, and they made it all the way to like the very end of all the competitions. I forget, I think it's called the Worlds. Anyway, very proud of them.
I'll just chime in a little bit on that question. One of the things I've tried to do is provide or create opportunities for people to engage youth or expose youth to STEM. So in academia, as professors, we're rated on research, teaching, and service. And many times that little service, I call them buckets, that service bucket is kind of small because it's all about the research. You as undergrads, you've experienced that. Where you're like, man, is this professor concerned about teaching or only his research or her research? So I've tried to make, I've tried to make it simple and easy for faculty to expose young people to STEM. And how we do that is create platforms and then engage faculty in creating hands-on projects related to their research. So that's one way to engage faculty. And then student orgs, I'm the advisor for NSBE here on our campus. The SHIP chapter falls under my umbrella, the SWE chapter as well. And again, just providing them opportunities. One of the cool things we do, we'll meet with their outreach coordinators or the K through 12 coordinators from the orgs and challenge them to create a week's worth of lesson plans related to any engineering topic and come out to the schools and present to the students.
All right, thank you. I see that you, Ms. Montrose, have worked in many aspects of research indices focused on energy, environment, and technology. However, I'm interested in learning when you knew this was your focus and how I can or any other aspiring engineering students can figure out or focus in our field after graduation.
So that's a really great question. And I talked to you guys about serendipity and, just seizing the moment. So I've been actually very lucky that I have had good opportunities for moving around at NASA. So for regarding all of those different areas, I do try to follow my heart in some ways. I studied, my specialty was design of integrated circuits in the computer engineering department at the University of South Florida. But I never worked on that because those opportunities are very limited in the US. And to be honest with you guys, I was afraid of moving. I'm a country girl from Puerto Rico. I came to Florida to get my degree, and that was huge. So the fact of going to Seattle to be in this design lab for Intel, I could not handle that. So the opportunity I had was working at Kennedy Space Center, and I was able to work with computer engineering and electrical engineering tasks. So I was then able to learn from my mentors and with my advisors that I seek at every job I have. I try to find who's going to help me learn this task and also to get out of the text, to move to the next step. That is how I have been able to approach a lot of these different tasks, because like I mentioned to you guys, I would start some jobs cold. It's like, hey, you look like you want a new job. You want to be in, applied sciences, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, sure, whatever that means. So a lot of it is being brave, which I have learned to do as I've gotten older and more comfortable in my own skin. But I can tell you, I did not start off like this. I was terrified of everything. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with further questions. But yeah, I would say you learn, you seize the moment. I have found myself reading an entire textbook on a subject if I thought it was going to help me out in these new jobs. So I would learn, read research papers, and get immersed so that I could be somewhat coherent when communicating with people. And so far it's worked. So
All
that's
right.
the answer.
And Miss Montrose, as a woman in STEM, how has discrimination played a role in your career?
So yeah, so I wanted to tell you guys, so when I came from Puerto Rico to University of South Florida, I was very young. And my written English was very good, but my spoken English was not. And if any of you have ever had the experience of like going to a country where you don't speak their language, your brain goes into brain freeze. It's really weird. So that's how I spent my first 2 years in college, just trying to get a hold of the language, even though I came with all of my math and science. I had taken all the chemistries and physics and calculuses in high school, but that transition with the language held me back. So then I found myself, I started off as a chemical engineer, and I felt that there was no one there to give me support in that department. I felt kind of discriminated against. So I decided to go down the list of engineerings alphabetically. Yes, it's a true story. So chemical, no good, right? So next was civil, actually, but I was not interested in that. So the following one was computer, and I was determined to go down that list and become an engineer. Why did I want to be an engineer? Totally petty. When I was very young, my mother's best friend's daughter became a civil engineer of all things. And the first thing she did was bought this beautiful red sports car. And I'm like, that's what I want to be when I grow up. I am not joking. I had no idea what it was, but I knew that I wanted that little red car. And if being an engineer I was 13 years old, seriously, guys. So anyway, so I was determined that I was going to be an engineer because I had started in the path, and to me it was going to be a great challenge, but I felt discriminated against. Then later, even when I was already in grad school, like my friends and I would speak Spanish. This is our first language. And our department was actually very, very diverse. There were people from all over the world, which was wonderful. But we spoke in Spanish, and some teachers decided that that was not acceptable. And they tried to break us up, separate us, and we were all teaching assistants, and we were sent to different rooms so we could not be together. It was completely stupid, and I had no idea what to do about it. So we would just not talk when we had to be in our little rooms on timeout or whatever. Later at NASA tends to be a fairly inclusive place, especially Kennedy Space Center, also very, very diverse. So many Puerto Ricans. Oh my God. So many people from different backgrounds, just a beautiful place to work. But sometimes we would get engineers from other parts of the US that were not used to that diversity, and again would either ignore what I had to say, very common, undermine me, very, very common. But again, because I had my mentors and I had my support structure at work by that, I was able to work through these problems, and it ended up being fine. But I have to say, it is not comfortable to be in a position at work where somebody's, ignoring you when you're talking because, you may have an accent or you look slightly different than they do. But anyway, so yeah, so I have found that. However, at NASA, I must tell you guys, this is such a wonderful story. After the civil unrest that we've had in this country recently, our administrator added inclusion into our values, which was huge. So the NASA values are like safety, and I know safety is number one because we did so much on training people on safety. It's about 5 values, but they added diversity and inclusion because they understand the importance of diverse teams. Where I work, I am just astounded to see the change with so many women and people of all colors in the leadership positions. It's just beautiful. So if anything, you know, I see progress. I have seen progress as I've grown and worked, and I have just great hopes that you guys will have an easier path moving forward, and that I will too, right? I'm not done. I have other things that I want to do in my life. So I think we're in a really, after all of this, I think we are in a better place for moving forward, but it's never, you know, it's never going to be over. We talk about this, all the minority uh, engineers in my group, we all get together every other Friday to chat. And we have concluded it's never going to be over, but it's definitely, we see movement in a positive direction.
All right, thank you so much for that. Dr. Henderson, describe the greatest challenges you see moving forward socially, environmentally, or innovatively in your field.
A really good question. My area, I'm trained as a chemical engineer. Go figure.
I'm so happy you stuck to it. It's beautiful. Chemical engineering is beautiful.
Yeah, so I have this joke with my sophomore students. I come in class and I'm saying, hey, I want to tell you about my first love. Her name is Kimmy. And I go, you know, down this list. And I said, and she made me cry and blah, blah, blah. But I'm trained as a chemical engineer. And in grad school, the lab was lonely, right? And so coming out of grad school, I knew I enjoyed the teaching aspect of academia, but not so much the lab work. And so I found that passion in teaching. So my mentors, once again, that theme of mentorship, my mentors, my advisor, pushed me in that direction. And when I started teaching, I would try things in the classroom, and I wanted to know how they impacted students and student success. And so I kind of landed upon this area of engineering education. And so my research area is engineering education. So although I'm in a college of engineering, most of my collaborators, and again, the work I do is really understanding how people become interested in STEM, what happens to them when they're STEM majors, and then even into their careers. But some of the challenges in STEM education, a couple of things, and Mayra started to hit on it. One of the questions that always comes up, and I'm brought into panels to talk about, and I'm writing proposals, National Science Foundation proposals even, shout out to them. They actually sponsor the after school program that I mentioned. So we have funding for them to support that program as well. One of the questions and one of the things or challenges that comes up is increasing diversity in STEM, right? That comes up. And as Mayra said, we're going to be, we've seen improvement, but we still got work to do. I recently had a panel, and one of the panelists mentioned that when she was in school in the 70s, we were talking about increasing diversity in engineering. And here we are in 2020, talking about increasing diversity in engineering. So the challenge is really, how are we going to be able to move the needle so that 50 years from now, we're not having another panel and asking, how can we improve diversity in engineering? If you notice across the country, a lot of the minority engineering programs, I don't know if you call it that at your school, that's what PROMES used to be called, the minority engineering program. It's more inclusive, includes all students, but was founded in the 70s. A lot of the MEP programs across the country were founded in 1970, 71, 72. NSBE even founded in the 70s. We've been having this conversation 45, 50 years. So one of the challenges is how can we really move the needle? And then the other challenge in my area of engineering education is student success. I notice in a lot of things that I'm reading lately, every campus is using these buzzwords. Student success this, student success that. Really, how are we going to move the needle such that our students are successful? And how are we going to incorporate students' perspectives in solving these problems? As a professor, I come up with these, I think, are cool ideas. Yeah, students are going to really learn in my class because I'm going to do this and this. And it may not resonate with them, especially the 21st century student. I went to college in the 90s. And so those are just two of the challenges.
Okay. So this question is directed towards both of you. What are you watching, reading, or listening to right now, in STEM related or otherwise?
So I'm actually reading a book on leadership called The 15 Commitments of a Conscious Leader. And it's really it's very different because it's leadership, but from this like kind of Buddhist point of view. So that's what I'm reading. But I'm watching a series. Don't do this, guys. You're in college. You don't have time to watch Netflix. Don't. Turn off your Netflix. But there's a series in Netflix called Dark. And it's science fiction. It's German. Listen to it in German, even if you don't speak the language, because the dubber people have no emotion at all, and it's really annoying. Fantastic. It's science fiction. Fabulous. That's what I'm reading and what I'm watching. Don't do it. Stick to focus.
I got a couple of things I'm reading and watching, but the number one thing I'm reading, and I talked about this as we were getting set up, is this book.
Oh my God, my nemesis. I ended up getting an A, but yeah, it was hard.
Same here. It was my least favorite in undergrad. Earned an A somehow. Now I'm teaching it for the first time. And I was sharing with Brianna that I find myself studying thermodynamics.
You're so brave. That's awesome.
So the students are crying and I am too. So when some of my students, if they happen to see this video, they'll say, oh, he's crying too. Yeah, I'm reading that. Also, I'm reading a book called Men and Masculinities. And one of the editors of the book is Dr. Brian McGowan. And I had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of years ago. And he's really talking about how do we better serve collegiate males. A lot of the guys that I mentor, or the folks that I mentor, happen to be Black males. And so I'm just reading about what has been done in the past and how I can better serve them. And then the other book is by Gianno Call. So I have this weird thing. I read like multiple books at a time. And I'll read some, I'll put it down. Next, read some, put it down. But Gianno Caldwell, he's a political strategist, and his book, Taken for Granted, it talks about his life. You may see him on Fox News a lot. But he talks about his life and growing up in Chicago, and it's really inspirational. It's also a provocative book because he has different political views than myself, but I still like to engage with people who have different thoughts and ideas than I. And so he talks about how his life experiences have led him to be a Black male who happens to be a Republican. So it's a pretty good read. And I happen to be a Facebook friend of his.
That
I don't
sounds
know him.
fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the question and answer period now. You can submit written questions through Zoom question and answer feature located on the bottom of the Zoom window. Or if anyone wants to ask a question themselves, you can turn your video on and use the raise hand function, and I'll call on you.
I want to take on the question of imposter syndrome.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Oh my God. Okay. I have such an imposter syndrome. It makes me even want to cry telling you about this. I thought I had overcome it because I have done, again, I'm this kid from rural Puerto Rico. My town is not, it's on the map in Puerto Rico. Nobody knows about it. It's tiny. And I will always be this rural kid from Puerto Rico. And yet, you know, heck, I got to shake freaking Obama's hand, and it just blows my mind, you know? So even with all that, I have so many self-doubts. At one point, I thought I had overcome it. I'm like, I'm old. I've seen it all. And in one of my professional associations, we have a book club. And we read this book on imposter syndrome. And I'm like, holy crap, I still have it. It is such a battle. But you have to just be brave. Sometimes, I don't know who's watching this, but you know, what I think of is, what would a white man do? And that is what I will then set forward. And one of the things, the behaviors that I observed was they would take the job even if they didn't know what it was about. Whereas normally we would, you know, especially as a woman, I would be like, I have to learn everything about the job before I take it. Just take the job and learn during, you know, as you're doing the job. So it is a constant battle. Like I said, I've read, I have mentors, I have coaches that I can bounce any of my doubts. I wish I could show you, but I have it in my office. I went to a training, a special federal employees training called Federal Executive Institute. It's this really big deal. And I had to draw a picture of my, of what I had learned and what was going to be my path forward. And I chose to draw a Buddha. It's a long story. It's easier if you see it. But behind the Buddha is a big mountain, because I felt that I had to climb that mountain all the time, but I never know how to get to the other side. And with a lot of my coaching, I learned that I have to have my crutches. I have to have my walking sticks. And they're my friends that are my close friends that I can tell anything to, my professional friends, and then my mentors and my coaches. So I'm still a work in progress. It's a hard one.
Yeah, same here. I struggle with imposter syndrome. Recently, I made a Facebook post, and I keep my Facebook to friends and family. I don't allow my students to follow me. But I recently said, you know, I'm dealing with this imposter syndrome, and like Mayra, I depend on my community for that support. And then there's this, it always comes to me at the right time. There's this poem, y'all probably saw it in movies. I forget, Mr. Carter or something like that with Samuel Jackson, where he keeps asking the folks, what's your deepest fear? What's your deepest fear? And I had to go dig and do some research on that quote. Marianne Williamson, and I don't know the entire quote, but she says in this writing, our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And we ask ourselves, who am I not to be brilliant, gorgeous, all of these wonderful things? And she's like, in fact, who are you not to be? And later on in that poem, it goes on and it talks about it's not our shrinking. And oftentimes when I feel imposter syndrome, I just want to kind of shrink, keep my head down, do my thing. She says, it's not our shrinking, but it's us giving our light and shining, right? That encourages others around us to do the same. And so, like I said, when I'm feeling like that, this poem just finds its way back into my news feed, or I'll hear it on a movie, or somebody will say, don't forget your quote. And so that helps. Yeah, I still struggle with it. I'm a work in progress also.
And I have to say also, and I love that, that's beautiful, that I count on people to tell me. That's why it's a good, you know, because for example, I was promoted to Deputy Associate Administrator for Programs. So I was promoted above what I'm doing now. And to me, I was like shell shocked, like literally, I was like deer in the headlights for like 3 weeks thinking they have entrusted me 112 projects. Holy crap. But I had all these people like, you're doing a great job. Oh, it's like, you know what? You're actually better than your former boss. You're doing a great job. And it's, even though I would be like, is that really true? I had to trust them. And that kept me with my head up, because you're right. I just want to curl into a ball, and I'm an extrovert. And for me to like curl into a ball and disappear is not my natural state, but sometimes that's all I want to do. So it's good to have people that will help you through.
So one question that came up was, how do you balance taking on more opportunities than you can handle while still wanting to try out many different fields of certain branches of engineering to see what fits best for you, especially when you still are in your undergrad and are running out of time in this grace period when your professional career hasn't started yet?
Jerrod, do you want to answer that?
Yeah. I'm trying to digest it. Yeah, running out of time, trying different things. I'm one of those people. I'm a self-proclaimed Renaissance man. I have a couple of my mentees, and we just call each other like, "Hey, Renaissance man, what are you up to?" But I think a big part of it is you're realizing and understanding that you won't be able to do it all at one time. How do you say it? If you constantly learn, you
Constantly evolving.
you have these opportunities that arise. Try things out. Don't be afraid to try those things out. You got a lot of days, hopefully, ahead to try different things out. So don't be afraid you might start out in a career path because these are the internships you've had, maybe in oil and gas, and that's all you got to do. After you go out and get some experience, and you might say, hey, I want to try a different aspect of energy, so on and so forth. And so don't be afraid. I started out in chemical engineering. In fact, undergraduate, traditional chemical engineering. I thought I wanted to go to medical school, decided not to, but my research project as a grad student was biomolecular engineering. And shout out to Dr. Sarah Perry, if any of y'all know her. We went to grad school together. She works at your university. She's a professor there. But yeah, biomolecular, as a chemical engineering student, I had to take undergrad classes to support that. As a grad student, a lot of animal sciences I had to learn. And now transitioning from laboratory work to now my research is on people. So again, I had to pick up another book. So I guess to get at answering that question is, pace yourself. It's a, what do they call it? Like a marathon, not necessarily a sprint. So my little 2 cents.
And one thing, so for example, when I started this job, when I was assigned this promotion, I had no time for stuff. I had to force myself to make sure that I exercise, because that's very important. Do it first thing in the morning. But let me tell you, don't watch TV, kids. Just don't. That's what I'm telling you. Save your Netflix for when you get a break. It is just so addictive. So if you can focus, but also make sure that you have time to take care of yourselves, that's very important. I wanted to tell you guys a couple of things that I had taken notes on. So you're all in engineering, right? Engineering, it's a hard degree to get. This is why we get paid good money eventually. It's because it is hard. You will not need your graduate work unless you truly love it and want to explore. A bachelor's degree will take you very, very far. But because it is very, very hard, you have to change your mindset. So whereas when you were in high school, your goal was to get to this engineering school, right? It was to get the best grades you could get, all these things that, all these clubs and AP classes and blah, 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 and 4.0. That's all great, But in college, you need to graduate, okay? We need you to graduate. We need you in the workforce. We need you. We need all hands on deck. We have a lot of problems in this country that require our problem-solving skills, and we need you to have that degree. Therefore, I want you to please not get completely discouraged when you take that thermodynamics class the first time and get an F, okay? It's okay. I took it again, I got an A, right? Just don't get discouraged. Have the long plan. To do this, change your, obviously it doesn't mean slack off and get all your C's. You're gonna get the best grade you can get. But if you don't get a perfect A in a class, it's okay. It's okay. Make sure you get mentors and get a study group. To me, my study groups with the kids that spoke Spanish, that were just like me, and we were all determined we were going to graduate, that was my lifeline. So that I recommend that, and get help as soon as you feel you're in a class and it's like, oh my God, I am lost. Get help. It's not gonna get any better. It's not gonna get any easier. Talk within your professional societies. Talk to someone who's already taken the class. It's a community, and we're all here to help each other forward, but we need you guys to graduate. We need you in the workforce.
There's so many good questions coming in. I'm seeing them. I'm like, oh yeah. One of the things I learned that I think might address a lot of these questions is as an engineering student, probably as a student across the board, one of the things I had to learn early on was how to teach myself and how to engage in academic text, whether I felt like the professor did a good job or not. Learning how to learn, it might be a better way of doing it. So that when I got into my career and I needed to learn a new topic, there's no professor necessarily there to teach me. I'm able to learn and teach myself. I also had another professor, to Mayra's point, when I was an undergrad, one of my professors, he told me that it was okay not to earn an A. Like, as long as you do your best, maybe that B is your best, or maybe that C, you got through it, move on. Don't let one exam define you. Don't let one grade in one class define you. And then my graduate mentor taught me it's okay not to know everything, not to know it all. You're pursuing a PhD, but you still don't know it all. Back to Mayra's point, teamwork, group work, you got now a community of people that can help. So.
And the cool thing about teamwork is that you will use that forever. There is not a single place where you can truly be alone. So get your teams, and these are lifelong friends that I still communicate with, even though it's been a few years.
I see so much coming in, Brianna. How are you gonna do that?
I know some of them overlap with each
Okay.
other, so I'm trying to see which ones.
Sure thing. Yeah. And I won't respond to everyone. We can maybe alternate. I don't know.
Do you want to pick one, Brianna?
I guess I can pick this one because I know this question personally speaks to me too. So it's for either one. Personally, from your own experiences and from those you observed, what has been the most difficult aspect of your transition from university to the workforce, especially ones that many don't tend to think about, such as the importance of soft skills?
I can tell you my most difficult transition was I was used to taking naps when I was in college. I could take a break and go to my apartment, take a nap, and come back to my next class. And that is not work, right? So I was falling asleep at work my first, I don't even know how many weeks, around like whatever, 2 p.m. I was like, siesta time. So that was a strange transition that nobody will ever tell you. It's kind of weird to transition to a 8 to 5 job. And regarding Teamwork, yes. I mean, I think that if you work in teams in college, and I know that the education has changed since I was in college. Thank you, Jerrod, for making that happen. And I know that my students that I mentor, they are actually already working in teams as freshmen and as sophomores in college. So that the teamwork teaches you how to work with very many different people. So you're right. That is something you learn to do. You learn to deal with difficult people. When I am in interview panels for engineers at NASA, that is one of the questions. How do you deal with difficult people? What do you do when you encounter a difficult coworker? You can't avoid them. But to me, the most dramatic thing was not being able to take a nap. But I got used to it.
That's why I stayed in academia. I can get a nap, but it's not one of those things. Well, I could, but it's not one of those things that I can leave at 8 to 5. I'm 10 to 10.
True, right?
With naps.
That's awesome. I will confess that when I was pregnant, I would close my door and take a nap in my office. My secretary knew. Anyway, napping is good. I wish it was part of our culture.
No.
So there's a question here for me that how did I find my mentors, and how do you make them agree to be your mentors? So I would not necessarily ask a person directly. I tend to befriend a person and then ask them for advice. And then this becomes, if it works out and we gel, because with mentorship, you kind of have to have a gelling factor. With coaching, not so much. But if you're looking for mentors, I have always done it very organically. But at work, we established a mentoring program for our own engineers, adults that have been in the workforce for a very long time. We have mentoring programs for them. So that's how I would find them, was simply finding someone that I think I could learn from and actually asking them questions and developing a relationship so I could continue to ask them questions. And I even did that in college. I would find who's the smartest person in this classroom, and I would befriend them and include them in my study group if I could.
Good deal. Someone asked, and I was trying to type a response about most surprising findings in my education research. And it's kind of funny in that a lot of the things that I find aren't really surprising. It's just that in the new area of engineering education, there's not been people that have come along and actually published about these findings. From practice, we've seen it years and years. Now with this quote unquote new field, people are now publishing and adding credibility to what I already learned from practicing teaching, for example. Now I can develop a study that demonstrates, how does virtual online learning impact student engagement? From experience, people can talk about it, but now we are actually writing and publishing about it. I got a project where we're investigating how the emergence of COVID-19, how that impacted faculty, right? From experience, I can go around and ask all kinds of people, but in the scientific field, credibility is brought when you can publish in a peer-reviewed journal. So similarly, with my work with underrepresented students in undergrad, how do they navigate? How do they persevere? We all have our stories of perseverance, but to publish about those and collect those stories and package it in a way that the scientific community will accept it and appreciate it, brings credibility. And now agencies like NSF, et cetera, will want to fund projects to find out more. So.
That's huge. That's huge. There's a question here about throughout my journey, I entered new jobs, positions, fields, but I had no idea about them. Did I have doubts about my abilities? Hello, yes, of course. It's terrifying. in many ways to step into a job that you don't know everything about, but that's okay, right? That's the whole point, is to learn. And like I mentioned to you guys, I would just approach, I'm going to take, obviously somebody thinks that I'm good for this job. Whoever's hiring me thinks I can do the job. Therefore, I am going to take that as my very first step and then learn as much as I can. And like I said, I'm very extroverted. I'm not afraid of going into people's offices and learning from them, and learning from other people's mistakes, if possible, and prevent my own mistakes that way. So that's how I've done it. But yeah, it's terrifying. I will not deny that it is scary, but it's okay. It's a good scary.
All right, so this is going to be the last question, and it's directed toward both of you to answer. What are some new challenges you've seen today's students of color face when they were not present when you went to college? And what are some of the challenges that persist to this day?
Ooh, I got to think about that one for a little bit.
So challenges that persist from the time when I went to college, is that the question?
Um,
Oh, I see the question now. New challenges. Wow, I don't know about new challenges. I know when I went to college, like I mentioned, I felt it was not overt discrimination, but there's definitely, even in a very diverse school, I still felt, I forget that it actually has a term, the microaggressions, that's the term, of being different. Also, like I would go to like the bookstore, in the engineering section of the bookstore, back in the days when we used to have textbooks that, you could carry around, and people asking me if I was in the wrong place because I was a woman, Latina, and I didn't look or dress like a engineering guy. So people would ask me if I was in the wrong part. I had a professor ask me if I had actually done my final project, which was completely different from any other student project. So duh, of course. Otherwise it would have looked like the other people's projects. So microaggressions exist. I personally, either because I don't care as much anymore, maybe I'm not as sensitive to them anymore. I have seen microaggressions towards Black men in my office, and those are addressed on the spot. If I can say something, I will say something. Now we have all been sensitized at NASA, so I think that will decrease. But I can tell you, as late as like March, when we were still in the office, I witnessed those. 2020 still happen. So, but it's better because now I think that we have elevated um, the issue somewhat.
Yeah, one of the things, and I don't believe it's unique to students of color, y'all have to live out and play out your lives with social media. Um, Sometimes you're on somebody's feed and not even aware. And so the things that you do, whether you're proud of them or not, have the ability to circulate around the world. I didn't have that when I was in college, and I had the ability to plug or unplug. And for me, college was like a bubble. Undergrad, I was able to live in that bubble. It's just wonderful, buzzing world. Also, I went to undergrad at a historically Black college and university. So, two, in fact. So it was easier for me to create community. As I went to grad school, I had to kind of figure out and find community. It was a little tougher, but I think a lot of the problems still persist. Studying engineering is going to be hard. Finding community, finding allies, we still got to do that. I wish we had more time.
So that's all the time we have for today. Another big thank you to Miss Montrose and Dr. Henderson for spending the time with us this evening. And also thank you to the UMass Amherst students who joined us for being such great participants. And remember, please fill out the post-event survey so we can improve for next time. Have a great night.
Thanks so much, Brianna. Thanks to everybody.